Hi, hello, welcome to Man with a Mentor. I am the man, your host, Matthew Barnard, and you may be wondering what a show called Man with a Mentor may be about. And it's about me talking to interesting people who had an idea for what their career wanted to be, and they just never denied that notion in their head, and they went for it, and they're having a successful, happy life. His name is Kemp Lyons, which I love that name. Like, it's so unique.
Yeah, they say never trust a man with 3 first names, and I've really got 3 last names, so
Right.
I figure I could be pretty trustworthy.
Kemp Lyons is a filmmaker who wants to tell stories that matter and help others do the same. Sometimes that's through Ember Scout, his production company, where he helps marketers drive business goals with strategic, cinematic, and story-driven content. And you can find more info at emberscout.com.
That's true.
That's all good.
That is the
I
sometimes.
summed you up. So let's talk about when you were a kid and you moved around a lot. So, like, why was that? What was happening? And how did it affect your perception of the world and places and people and things?
Wow. Let's go there. Yeah, it's great. The story's not that interesting, to be honest. My dad, I think he was just ambitious has like a negative connotation, and I don't mean it that way. I mean it in the sense like he always wanted to do better in his career, and he wound up in airport parking, and that's what took us all over the country.
Oh, gosh.
It was different airports and different parking and ground transportation and stuff like that. And so that's what took us around. Honestly, I think the biggest thing that it did was it made me a little more outgoing than I otherwise would have been. It's definitely exposed me to a lot more, the moving around. And so I was lucky that by the time I hit my adulthood, I'd been in most of the states, either traveling or living or something. And so I feel like I was exposed to a lot of stories and got to know a lot of different kinds of people and a lot of different kind of like subcultures of the US, which was really fun. And I think has had some professional outcomes, I suppose.
Right. But when did like a green light or something go off where you were inspired or something happened and you said, I want to follow this track of your life or what you're doing now? And how did that happen? And how did you like grab it and get on a path to be who you are today?
It's a great question. And it's not that clean of a story, right?
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, and I've told it before on like LinkedIn and other spots because I think it's a little bit uncommon to meet someone like in the film industry who hasn't tried to be there really hard for their whole life. I'm not in Hollywood, but whatever. People that point cameras for a living. As a kid, I just wanted to be a video game designer. That's all. That was what I spent most of my childhood and adolescence wanting to do. And it was really about storytelling to me. Video games remain a really interesting way for stories to be experienced, sort of as an experience, right? Through choices and things like that. And so that really hooked me, and to apply sort of like common narrative technique to game experiences was something that was really interesting to me.
Video games have really changed into like kind of a choose your own adventure.
Especially
style.
in the 90s, right, is when they first kind of came into that. And my childhood was sort of the high time of really starting to experiment with more cinematic techniques in video games.
Right.
And so that's what hooked me and why I wanted to do that. But then I got a full tuition scholarship somewhere. And I said, yeah, I'll do that.
Right.
They didn't have a games program, but they did have a film program. And so I started on that path for a while, only producing and screenwriting as part of the program. And turns out you're pretty unemployable in 2009 as a film producer, as a 22-year-old film producer and screenwriter. And thankfully got a job at the college that I had just graduated from, running all the equipment. And so we had a small studio, we had edit labs, these kinds of things. And so I did that for a while and kept trying to get into the video game industry. Went to conferences, tried tinkering on stuff on my own, but it was never the scale. And frankly, I don't think I had the discipline or the community for it. And one day,
why was that? Like,
which one?
Examine your your lazy self.
Well, seriously, I think that's part of it. I think part of it is, game development is a pretty collaborative medium. it's pretty technical. And while I'm not someone who's scared by the technical, I think perhaps maybe we can put it on some kind of perfectionism, right? If I can't do it at this level, it's not worth doing. I think that was a subconscious thing that was happening there, where it's just like, well, if I can't make it, blah, 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 like, why bother doing it at all? And that's so long ago now. I'm really sort of armchair philosophering myself.
Right. And you moved on to other things, and you're not like sad or filled with regret.
And that's what it was. I took a Thanksgiving break to sit and say, like, okay, this is not working. You know, I'm 25 years old, 26 years old or whatever at this point. Like, this, pursuing video games, however poorly I was doing it, was not working. What should I do next? And I came back to, like, why did I want to do this? It was really the storytelling. And then I sort of, like, slapped myself and said, I am surrounded by film equipment, film professors who want to, like, who like me and could teach me things I don't know if there's still some gaps in my knowledge, students that might help me. Why have I ignored the assets that were in front of me this whole time, right? The community that was in front of me this whole time, and the skills that I had, right, in favor of some other thing that was, like, becoming not possible. And so why not say, I still care about story. Why don't I express it this way with the assets at my disposal versus assets that I don't have? And from that point on, it's only been increasing passion for filmmaking. And so my next job was at a university where I still worked with students, but now I was doing the marketing work, some live events work. And that's where I really cut my teeth on what I'd say is more of a corporate storytelling style, or more of a market forward. I think everything before that was more narrative, more like story for story's sake. And so at that next university, it was where I got to be like, okay, there needs to be clicks on this. There's views that convert, and, like, really starting to think about things through the marketing lens. And then after that, got a job as a creative director at a video agency here in Cincinnati. And that's where, like, really took off my sense of, like, what is the marketplace need for video? Like, how do we sell this thing? How are stories useful for people beyond a story's inherent worth, I guess?
You know, do you think the importance of branding is bigger than ever? And how do you convince people to, like, figure out a strategy for that?
You've caught me at a really interesting moment of that question because I think we are in a little bit of an inflection point. 3 years ago, I would have said, like, absolutely, brand is super important. What I'm starting to think is that brand is important for some kinds of companies and products, but the rest of us just want solutions. And so, like, the rise of social video, right? The rise of influencer marketing. These kinds of things are having more impact on the bottom line of businesses, partly because they're trackable, and what you sort of, like, what's trackable becomes what you create more of, because you can sort of determine success metrics a lot more easily, and brand is just a little bit harder to quantify the success of a brand sort of thing.
Oh, right.
But I think it's definitely, like, on the margins, right? Like, when you're competing on the margins on something, the brand is what matters. So, like, a Coke and Pepsi, like, major companies, obviously, like, they are competing for a limited pool of customers, and the difference between them is not that great. And so you're going to choose something based on a branding perspective. I don't know if that's the case necessarily for the local coffee shop. Sometimes then proximity and just reminders that it exists is all you need. And so I think today we're moving into a marketing landscape that is broader than almost ever before, because there's a need for brand marketing. There's also a need for all these down funnel activities that are maybe more important depending on the life cycle and size of your business.
All right, let's talk about the kind of projects that you do now and how those projects come to you, or are you out there, like, hustling to find the next thing to happen? Ooh, yeah. You know, because some people, like, create such a weird buzz around them that they can't stop the work coming. And some people are, doing something, and then they got to keep putting this, like, the CEO hat on and get the next business to pay the bills.
I would say I am not blessed with the problem of everyone knocking on my door all the time. Right. That is not the problem that I currently face. So it is a little bit of a hustle. It's definitely getting out there. It's creating content. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, which kills me. Like, personally, like, I find LinkedIn to be uninteresting most of the time, but that is where a lot of my target audience is. And so I spend a lot of time just talking about, like, video and storytelling techniques and things like that on LinkedIn, just to keep people engaged. And then, a lot of networking, a lot of referrals. That's really the best way to grow. And then working with agencies has been a really powerful lever. Instead of having 15 direct brand connections, I can have one agency that uses me a lot, and they have 15 direct brand connections.
Right.
So the margins are not as good from a business perspective to work with agencies, but the consistency is really nice if you can get that relationship strong. And I'm lucky to have a couple of really strong relationships with some agencies.
I wanted to ask a question about if someone came to you and said, I want to be a creative director, and I'm whether they're like 14 or 40, like what would you say to that person in terms of really helpful, good advice and things to like not go down this path? This path will lead you into the dark woods.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this question actually lately, just because of how much I feel like the sort of marketing video industry is changing, based on pressure from AI, brands, whatever. There's all kinds of things that are putting pressure on us. I would really tell someone the best shot you have for a long-term career in this, especially if you're young and you don't have a lot of like overhead, just start creating stuff. Really do your best to create a lot of content in a specific area. Be I don't want to use the term influencer because I think that's, it's a little bit passé of a term. We're starting to use the word content creator. And really, I mean that a little bit more. I don't mean become an influencer. You can't control who you influence, but you can control the kind of content you create and the regularity with which you create it. And so I would say to any, especially young person, again, who has low overhead, doesn't need to make a lot of money, get out there, start making what you want to make as soon as possible. And partnering with smaller brands. If you want to get into the brand space, is partnering with smaller brands earlier on to just start getting the reps in. It is less stable than it has ever been. And I think that may be true for a while. That's the brutal truth of, I think, what's happening right now is we're seeing, there's always been the shrinking middle, always. And I think that's getting worse, right? You're either going to make your commercial campaign for $150,000 and up, or you're going to spend less than $5,000, less than $1,000 paying a creator, $500 to make a thing for TikTok, right? So there's all this space in the middle that used to have some really healthy businesses, and I see that really getting thinner as people are pushing either up or mostly pushing down. So if you can be one of those guys that's at the bottom, able to gobble up a lot of those little opportunities and then build your reps so that you can start rising the ranks, I think that's the path to success.
Oh, I like this advice.
I wish it was more positive. I wish I could be like, yeah, man, just like go to a video studio and say, I'm interested. And they'll like, can I just hang out? Like, I don't think that's helpful anymore. I really think the only thing to do is create, which in some ways is like really cool, but tough for the career changer. You said like someone in their 40s, I have a lot of empathy for that. My wife is a career changer, and I wish I could give more opportunities to career changers like that. But I don't know how you do it if you also need to have an income. You're probably 5 years of doing stuff before you get noticed. And if you can't afford to subsidize that somehow, it's hard to imagine the long-term success being easy.
Right. Do you think there's a segment of people that want to go into an artistic or creative endeavor, but they just can't get past the struggle or the low pay, for the initial few steps?
100%. In some ways, that's my story, right? Like, I did not go to Hollywood. I think if you'd asked me at 20 years old, 21 years old, when I was, did my daily pages in the script writing software and like was really trying to write a lot, my dream would have been then to, if I was not going to be a game designer, at least go to Hollywood and be a writer of some kind.
Right.
And I was the guy that needed security. That's a personality thing, whatever. I've accepted that. And so moving into sort of the commercial corporate space was that sort of compromise. I don't think it's the same compromise now. I think even commercial corporate is becoming more of a risky endeavor than it was 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 15 years ago. I saw some posts on LinkedIn just the other day about how ads used to be the place that like the true creatives were like, well, I need a little security, so they go do ads. But now ads is just it's a wild west of contract jobs and hustling, and that's just how it is these days. And so I think we're going to have to find other ways to find our sort of backup creative careers, right?
Right.
I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think we're in for a lot of change in the next 5 years.
Oh, God. Are you scared of that change, or you're gonna muddle through it?
We're gonna muddle through as best we can, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of uncertainty ahead, right? And I don't want to come on a podcast and be a downer, but it is something that everyone should be eyes wide open about the future. AI is a bit of a threat, and the changing business model is a bit of a threat. Right. But I think there's ways to still thrive. And like I said, to frame it positively, it's never been more valuable to make your own content. If you can find a way to make your own content and be happy with that, it's never been more important to do that than now.
I'm wondering, when you're working, do you find it difficult or challenging to have your board meeting hat on and then have your brainstorming hat on and your creative hat on and your after it's finished hat? Do you how do you change between those roles, and which one do you like the best?
I like the creative director hat the best. The guy that gets to come in and be like, all right, we've got the strategy now. How do we get creative about the story that we're going to tell to achieve whatever ends that we have? That's still my favorite part.
Right.
Everything else is what you have to do. And there's other roles that I enjoy more or less or whatever, but the CEO business development hat has become more and more important to the business. And so I do have to don that a little bit more. The code switching is just, sometimes it's bulking the work together, right? Or oftentimes work that I especially find challenging, I will reward myself and go to the coffee shop and do it. The coffee shop that also serves beer. And I will do the coffee at the start, and then I will say, good job, Kemp. You did the thing that was hard. Have a beer. Finding little ways to sort of motivate myself through that has been important.
Right.
But it's a reality. I think it's a reality that all of us have to live in now, right? We all have to live in this world where we are our own marketing team, our own CEO, our own bookkeeper, and our own creative people.
Right.
And if you can't do all of those hats, or find a way to do all of those hats, I think it's gonna be difficult to sort of have a sustaining business.
Well, let's talk about balancing your life.
Yeah.
Because you've got two boys.
Two
How
boys.
old are they? And you're married.
I am married. I have two boys. One is 4.5. One just turned 2, and then we have a third on the way in April.
Oh my gosh! Yay!
Yeah.
A third boy, or you don't know?
We don't know yet. We're gonna find out in 2 weeks. I'm very excited.
Yay.
The good news is, if it's a little girl, that'll be nice to complete the set. And if it's a little boy, at least we've done that before.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel like you balance all that too?
Yeah. Here's the reality, and one of the reasons why I'm going to hang on to independence as long as I can is I'm the flex parent, and that's just a reality. I think any 2 working parent household these days, you need to have at least one parent who can pick the kids up early, if they're sick, take them to doctor's appointments or whatever. And so my wife, as a financial planner, has a pretty standard 8:30 to 5 schedule. And
Right.
So it's up to me to do all the rest of it. And so prepping dinner, all these kinds of, whatever, it's great. Right. And so the balance really is,
unless you suck at all those things.
right. But I love being a dad. I love sort of the domestic side of my life quite a bit. And so it's a privilege to be able to make a living pointing cameras at people and still be like, I'm going to pick the kids up early and go to the zoo. That's what I'm going to do today because I can, because there's, maybe I don't have enough work right now and whatever, or I've sent out as many lines as I'm going to send out. And so let's pick the kids up early. And so the balance is really about that. And then on the days or the weeks that I have a heavy workload, that's where the partnership comes in. And so I'm traveling 2 weeks in 2 weeks in December, 2 separate weeks in December, I'm traveling for a handful of nights. And it's that's when she steps up and, flexes her schedule a little bit on those days to make sure that the boys are taken care of. And
what's next?
Let's talk
where
about
do you
what's next.
see yourself? Keep branding things? Are you going to do films on the side? If someone came to you with a film idea and a budget, would you jump on them, or would you?
Maybe. I had a friend So a feature documentary that I ended up co-producing and editing and shooting a big chunk of was kind of that story. Started it as just like, oh yeah, I'll come and help out on some shoots when I was working at the university that he worked at. And then years later when he'd wrapped production, he's like, hey, I could really use an editor. Like, great. Okay, cool. Yeah, fun. So I've got a co-producing documentary credit under my belt, which is really great.
Was this the bicycle?
No, this is a different one. This is, it's called Luminous. It is a feature documentary about an astronomy professor who sees a binary star system that's about to merge and explode and become a new visible star in the sky in the next 5 years, which is like, on an astronomical sense, tomorrow, right? And so the story of him going, I'm pretty sure, like the sort of the scientific process for how and why. And
because the bicycle thing.
That's a short documentary we released 5 weeks ago, yeah.
It was sort of genius, and I was like, you need to send this to CNN Heroes. It has that vibe of like, you could give someone a sweater or a can opener or something, but if you give someone a bike and you give them the ability to transport themselves from A to B and change their life, like that can change their life.
That's right.
Is there something different about someone giving you food or clothing, which is something that you need and cannot live without? Does someone giving you a valuable accessory, it takes you from surviving to hopefully some level of thriving.
The bike helps many people here, African people.
Every day I drive back.
A bicycle can be freedom.
So I was like, you need to call Anderson Cooper, I think.
If you got his number, let me know. That's what appealed to me about that story, was that when I talked to Vincent, who's the main character of this film, which context for the listeners, viewers, it's a short documentary we produced over the last 6 months or so about a man running a volunteer bicycle workshop for Mauritanian refugees in the small town of Lockland, Ohio, outside of Cincinnati. What attracted me about it was his perspective. He said a bicycle is freedom, and the bicycle gives more than just a way to get around even, right? That's obviously really important. But what the story that I took away from it, and I think the film makes the case, is like it's really giving them a sense of agency. And these men have already exercised an enormous amount of agency to come to America from Mauritania, usually through the Darien Gap, like crazy stories these guys have, survived crazy things, but they get here and then they're kind of stuck. They can't work.
Right.
You know, they're dependent on anyone and everything to get all of their basic needs met, more or less, while their asylum cases are working their way through the system. And so by giving them bikes, now he's extended their range of motion and their ability to have agency over their life. So now they make significant choices, right? It's not just about who gives me what. It's about what do I need to go do? How can I do it? And it expands the range of their possibilities. And that's really what hooked me on the story, as well as a handful of other things that if, include a link in the show notes or whatever. But it was a really great story to tell. I'm really glad that we were able to capture it.
And it's on your YouTube channel and on your website, or no?
There's a sub page on the website as well, but it's just on YouTube right now, which is probably going to bite me a little bit when it comes to the festival application circuit. But when you ask the first question, what does the future look like? I'm trying to take the advice I'm giving young people, trying to lean a little bit more into content creation. Obviously, still with an eye of serving clients. I really like making useful video and useful stories that move some kind of needle. I really, really like that. The challenge and constraints of client work is super fun and rewarding for me.
Right.
But I would like it if it looked a little different, right? I don't love every client project I get. And so if I can start doing more documentary style things that are a little bit more brand storytelling style and can develop a stronger body of work and a more compelling business argument around it, that's how I see my future being. So I'm hoping in the new year to start a series of micro documentaries. Still working on the branding of all that and what that's going to feel and look like, what the pace is going to be like. I'm hoping for once or twice a month, releasing some kind of a 2-minute documentary on the YouTube channel for people to watch and engage with. That's probably focused on like almost that unsung heroes kind of vibe of like, how's a normal everyday person creating or experiencing impact, right? So that's probably what the next step is for us.
Right. Okay. You work on Kelly Ripa. and I'm gonna work on Anderson Cooper.
Great. Done.
And we're gonna get these to them somehow.
Yep.
And all your information is available on emberscout.com, and you have a YouTube channel under your name.
Yeah, under Ember Scout.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, doing everything through Ember Scout for now.
Okay.
I like the brand. I like the metaphor that we've built of navigating people through the video wilderness.
Right. I like that. Yeah. There's a video of you talking about like the scout and it being like a metaphor, which is a big word for Matt.
There's a little bit too in that film. I almost wanted to get on camera and just like look down the barrel of the lens and be like, it's a metaphor.
Right.
Do you get it?
Right.
It's not helpful.
Yeah, I did eventually. Thanks, Kemp.
Thanks.
And thanks for listening or watching to another episode of Man with a Mentor.